Real estate is about freedom, choice freedom, time freedom, and money freedom, and the impact you can make with that freedom. But it doesn't come without cost. Your freedom takes work. That's why Neil Timmins brings together the tools you need to build your real estate legacy, from tips and tricks to interviews with industry titans. It's all here in one place. Real Grit. Let's get to it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Real Grit. I'm Neil Timmins. Hey, I'm here with Gavin Gallagher. I'm excited about this conversation for multiple reasons. One, he comes from and he's out of Dublin, Ireland. So it's fun to have an international guest on the show. But more importantly, so many people I talk to and so many people I think a lot of us see, ended up in this business post 2010. There's not a lot of people who had the deep grit to make it all the way through the recession and then to come out on the other side really victorious. Gavin's one of those people, and he made it through the 2008 crisis, but essentially barely. It was a lot of reckoning that he had to go through, and we're going to get into that. And he's come back in a very resilient way, manages and owns and operates from ground up. They built it 1.5 million square feet there in Dublin. Corporate grade A office occupied by companies like Oracle, by companies like Google as well. So we're going to get into that. Gavin, how are you?
Good, Tim and Neil. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to see you. I appreciate you taking the time here and making it work in the schedules when we're not quite in the same time zone. So thanks a ton.
No problem at all.
So let's just start at the beginning and then work our way through. Just tell me, how did you even get into real estate?
Real estate kind of runs in the family. So my father and my grandfather were both house builders, and they used to do housing estates here in Ireland. And so as I was growing up, I used to kind of be brought to building sites, and my dad was back in those days, health and safety was not something that everyone kind of gave great thought to. So having your 4-year-old running around a construction site didn't seem like a bad idea for him. But it really, for me, it was always so exciting to be climbing in and out of houses as they were under construction. So that really kind of whetted my appetite. And then around about my teenage, I think I was probably 14 or 15 years of age, we went on a family holiday vacation to America, and we landed in New York, JFK, and stayed in Manhattan for, I think, 2 or 3 days. And that just blew my mind as a teenager. Kind of the skyscrapers were just mind-blowing. And I came back from that vacation. I mean, we went to San Francisco and various other places as well, but I came back from that vacation with this obsession for New York, skyscrapers and just that whole thing. And so I made my decision kind of in my teens that I was going to be an architect, and I was absolutely obsessed with that kind of journey to get to that.
Yeah. So obviously your upbringing had a deep impact in your trajectory, like so many of us it does, and for various reasons. But it's cool to see that, following in the footsteps to a degree. Obviously what you do versus what where you're in the industry is the same, but you've varied in terms of your practice. So in your teenage years, you wanted to be an architect. You were entranced by the skyscrapers and the whole metropolis. So walk me through university, and where did you end up post-university then?
Well, what I did was I wasn't a very academic kid in school. So
Sure.
For me, it was not going to be easy to get into architecture school.
Sure.
And, but I just was so obsessed with it that I went really, really deep on the whole topic. And I ended up getting an interview with there's 2 colleges in Ireland, just, bases that on your academic grades. And I wasn't going to get into that, but there was another one that was more of a trade type arrangement. And what they did was they didn't look so much at your grades as they looked at your aptitude for the business and for that kind of work. And I hit, A on all of those kind of interviews and aptitude tests that they gave me. So they kind of said, okay, come on in. So I joined architecture. I did 5 years of architecture, but right in the middle of it, my father died very unexpectedly. He was on business in Africa and he came back very, very ill, and he lasted a couple of months. So when that happened, it kind of changed the trajectory for me. I was not going to be going down the traditional route of, getting a job as an architect and stuff. I needed to kind of roll up the sleeves and help out with the family business. And so I did finish my degree. To give my mother credit, she kind of forced me to keep going to college and to finish that, because she wanted me to have my degree. But at the end of the day, when the day I got my degree on a piece of paper, she said, okay, now handing it over to you, just kind of take care of all this, confusion, because my dad was in the process of constructing and building various assets at the time.
Sure. Wow. Well, that had to be a challenging piece to be able to step in. Were you involved through your teenage years and growing up in the business?
No, that was one of the biggest challenges. This is when I say my dad died unexpectedly. Like, dad was a kind of a businessman, and he was off, doing his thing. He was kind of an entrepreneurial guy. But I was running around like a teenage kid does, like enjoying myself, not really paying any attention to what dad was doing. And so when he got sick, it was suddenly a real kind of shock to the system. And he was in hospital for 3 months, declining in health constantly. And watching that really had an impact on me. And my mother, it really affected her as well. So at the end of the day, when he died, my mother and we sat down and we started going through all of the posts that had built up over a couple of months. And we started realizing, like, whoa, he has a 2 million loan here. There's a big, huge overdraft over here. And I didn't realize the house was mortgaged. Did you know there was a mortgage on the house? All of this stuff started to kind of come out of thin air. And it was a baptism of fire in many respects. You kind of grow up very quickly when that happens to you.
Yeah. So walk me through the next few years. You're handed the reins, family business at this point. Did you focus just on buttoning things up, or was there a transition to let's grow? We have to produce some new things at some point?
Yeah, it was very much. It's funny thinking back. Like, my dad had a big impact on me and my mindset and stuff. And one of the things that he always said to me was, don't wait to get involved in the family business. Don't get involved in the family business. He said, I want you to go and chart your own course, we'll say. Yeah. And I don't want you kind of like sitting back waiting for me to kind of hand over the reins to you, because it may not happen. I might sell the business, I might do whatever. Yeah. So don't expect that. And so this was very much kind of a spanner in the works in terms of what he had said. So I was already thinking about starting my own business, doing my own thing. And suddenly I'm involved in kind of rectifying the sinking ship. So what happened was I kind of stabilized things. And once I'd stabilized things, I kind of thought, okay, now I'm going to start my own business. So what I did was I started a small architectural practice, and I started dabbling myself in investment and development of properties. And at the time, it was the perfect time for it, in a sense, because Ireland back in the late 90s and the early 2000s was just freight train in terms of economic growth. We were called the Celtic Tiger as a nation, and it was a monkey, a checkbook, and the monkey would come back a success. You could buy anything and you'd be up 25% at the end of the year. So it was really, from that point of view, it was a great time to be getting involved. And so I went from dabbled in a couple of small property deals, and they went really, really well. And then my confidence grew, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this other slightly bigger deal. And that went really well. And then I kind of went, okay, I'm going to go all in on this next deal. And that went really well. And it just snowballed like that very, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started out, what types of things were you involved in? Houses, commercial properties? What did that look like?
I'll tell you, there's a funny little anecdote I can tell you. And I was working for a couple. I had started my architectural practice. And at the same time, I was thinking about, I must get into development and I must do all these other things. But the easiest thing that I could get my hands on was a house extension for a couple. And in fact, one of the people was an American lady and her Irish husband. And they gave me this house extension. Now, not very exciting, but as your first job, you're of course very excited about it. Right. So I'm like, great, I'm going to do the best, amazing job. And I started designing this nice kitchen extension for them, and in this house in the city. And I worked for about 9 months, like long hours, doing really, the best possible job that they could do. And the sum total of my fee at the end of all that was about £9,000 Irish, which is maybe, $10,000 or something like that. And I can remember they had asked for a number of extra things that they wanted done, and that had increase the budget. And typically an architect gets paid, based on the budget size.
Correct.
So I was justified in asking for an extra £2,000 because they had spent an extra £20,000 on their budget. And so the fee went up. And they were arguing with me that they couldn't afford it and this and that. I can remember at the same time, I had gotten my hands on this tiny little plot of land in the west of Ireland. And I went and I used my architectural sort of knowledge and skills to put 4 houses on paper. And I applied for planning permission and I got the planning. And I went to a local sort of broker and I said, what can I sell these for? I want to build these. What will they? And he came back to me a couple of days later and he said, you won't need to go and build them. I've actually got somebody local here who will just buy the plans from you. And I had paid 25,000 for this plot of land. And this local builder came along and offered me 125,000.
Wow.
So 100,000 in maybe 3 months. And at the same time that I was negotiating that, I was arguing, for the 2,000 extra.
2,000 extra.
I was just like, you know what, keep your 2,000. And then I just said, you know what, I'm going all into the real estate side. I'm just like going to leave the architecture behind because it's just too much hard work for not enough reward as far as I was concerned.
Right.
And this was an eye opener for me. So I thought, okay, I'm going all into this business.
Yeah. And then after that, what did you do? Did you roll into construction or was it largely development?
I never got into direct construction.
Yeah.
What I did was I would buy assets that needed either a little bit of construction work done to them or something. What I did, the next asset that I got involved in, I decided to pivot. So I had an architectural business, but what I decided to do was to pivot to being a development manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was able to do was I had just made money doing this project, so I had capital to go into a new development project, but I was also selling my services. Instead of being an architect now, I was calling myself a development manager. So I would go and do development projects on behalf of clients with my own money there available to kind of invest in it with them. And so I did a project for a client and it worked out very well. And in the process of seeing and working for him, I saw this way of making money, which involved commercial retail property. And they had done some really interesting things. And I thought, wow, I'm going to replicate that. And I found a similar site. So this project, it involved a kind of about a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot retail unit. It was basically a strip mall, but it was an empty strip mall that had just been constructed. And it had, the timber framework at the front where it was all blocked up, boarded up. And I turned this huge big unit, which was way too big, into 3 smaller units that would rent for a much higher multiple. Right. And I bought that total thing for about 700,000. I put the 100,000 profit that I'd made in the other, and I leveraged up with debt on the rest. And by splitting it into 3 units, getting tenants into those 3 units, and then selling the 3 units as investments, I made about 2.5 million profit, or about 2.5 million selling that, which equated to almost 1.5 million of profit.
So incredible.
It was just, it blew my mind that this was possible. And these things were going up all over the place, these strip malls. And a lot of, they were being built, typically they were being built by builders, like house builders and apartment builders, that were being told as part of their planning permit that they had to build this strip mall on the ground floor. And to them, it was a nuisance. They were kind of like, why can't we build apartments? And they would build these and they would just put them on the market and they didn't care. And I was coming in quietly and saying, I'll buy it if you don't mind, and getting this incredible bargain. So I did that multiple times and I made those kind of profits.
What an incredible opportunity. And you seeing a void in the marketplace that you could just come in and
just slip in. And the thing is it's a great thing. And it was very exciting at the time, but you do that a few times and you start to think that you are invincible.
Yes.
And I done this, the profit from that first deal allowed me to go into 3 or 4 others. And those 3 or 4 others, I went into kind of simultaneously. And how the way construction and projects work, it can take 6 or 12 months until it comes to fruition. And I suddenly found about a year and a half later that all of these 4 or 5 projects were coming to fruition around the same time. And I was making 2 million here, 4 million here, 3 million here. And suddenly there was, about 10 million of cash coming in one go. Whereas before it had been a real hand-to-mouth kind of existence.
Yep.
Suddenly it was there. And that kind of success so quickly and all happening at the same time, just I kind of lost the kind of the discipline and the steady hand that you need. I started thinking I could go and do anything. And so I started leveraging up, started buying assets around the place. I bought an apartment in the south of Spain. I bought an apartment in New York City. I wanted to kind of scratch that itch that I had gotten as a teenager. Right. And then I went after this huge project in the south of Spain. It was a shopping mall under construction, and it was huge. It was 42 million in total. And I kind of went in and I acquired the kind of the rights to kind of complete this project. And I put in some of my own capital, and then I got the rest from investors. And I thought this was going to be this really luxurious, high-end kind of boutique right on this waterfront marina kind of setting. It was absolutely pristine. Yeah. And I was having conversations with Ralph Lauren and Gucci and all of these brands to go in. And that was driving me. And I thought, I'm going to turn, this kind of, the 10 million that we've made in the last couple of years, I'm going to turn that into 30 or 40 million of profit. And then suddenly 2008 comes along. And I had started to sense that there was trouble ahead, because I kind of follow the US news cycles quite closely. Sure. And I was watching all about the housing, the mortgages, and I was thinking, I don't like the look of this. This is bad. But by that stage, you're in so deep. There's no getting out of a project while it's midway through construction. And so I was completely committed, whether I liked it or not. Right. And that project ended up, I spent years trying to keep it going, but it ended up a complete and total loss. The 12 million of capital that we put in as equity, we lost every penny of that. And the original bank that had agreed to lend us 30 million of senior debt, they pulled out just before the debt was actually due to be paid out to us. And it was a total disaster. I suppose at this stage, I'd spent maybe 2 years flying around the world, trying to meet investors, trying to kind of shore up the issues. Yeah. And I spent time in the Middle East and all of this. And so the whole world was kind of coming crashing down around me. The assets that I had back in Ireland were falling in value substantially. I saw my portfolio fall in value by about 60%. Wow. And whilst that was happening, I was in the south of Spain trying to shore up this huge deal that I had gone for. And at the same time, my marriage now was coming under an awful lot of pressure, because I was spending a lot of time away from home trying to meet investors. Right. It was just all happening at the same time. And so, basically it got to this point. I had to produce a net worth statement, or, your statement of assets for my bank. And I used to have this template on my computer table, on my desktop, that would have all of the assets, and you would just plug in kind of the square footage, and it would calculate it automatically. And I put in the up-to-date comps and the debt and everything like that. It just came out this big red 16 million negative. I can remember just staring at the computer and going, I must have put
can't be right.
This can't be right. I must have put in an extra zero somewhere. Yeah. And I studied that sheet for an hour to realize that it was absolutely spot on, that I was currently 16 million underwater with all of these things happening. And so, it was just like a death by 1,000 cuts, just constantly getting pestered by banks. Can you come in and meet us? And can you pay this debt? And can you do this? So it was extraordinarily difficult. It went from being this fantastic, bonanza of cash where you could change your car just whenever you felt like it and things like that, and fly first class wherever you want to go and stuff. Suddenly you realize, God, why was I so stupid, caring about all that stuff? Whereas over here, I should have been paying attention to what was kind of coming around the corner. And so I beat myself up for quite a couple of years because I got into a difficult situation. I ended up divorced, and that added to the complications where you now have to kind of fund 2 homes instead of 1. Correct. And it was just kind of a real lesson in resilience.
What was your mindset during this period of time?
There was times when it was dark. I have to confess, it got pretty dark at times. And I started to kind of have this view that, God, I'm not even going to be able to put my kids through the same school that I went to. I'm not going to have, the resources to be able to afford that. Right. And so it got kind of pretty dark at one stage. But one of the things that I had learned was when my dad had been very, very ill and watching him getting very, very sick, I just sort of thought to myself, I want to be the fittest version of myself. Since he died, pretty much I've been quite sort of obsessive about exercise and my health and just keeping myself as healthy and as fit as possible. So whenever I went out for a run in the morning, which is kind of my routine, I always came back with this healthy attitude, and it kind of blew away any negativity. And I kind of used maybe, an hour-long run to think, to plan, and to map out the issues that I was dealing with and set the priority for the day. But the real time when it all started to kind of change was when I stopped blaming others for the predicament I was in and just owned up to the fact that, look, I created this. It's not the fault of the banks. It's not the fault of Lehman Brothers for going bust and causing this financial crash. It's me. It's on me. And just once you kind of own up, there's a Navy SEAL I follow called Jocko Willink. Yep. And Jocko has a great book called Extreme Ownership. And that whole thing, just stop blaming others, just grab the nettle by the hand and just kind of rip it out. So once I did that, I actually started to turn things around. I started to kind of just get realistic about the situation that I was in and start, looking to I started assessing, okay, what have I got? I've lost a lot of financial resources, yes, but I haven't lost my network of connections. Right. I haven't lost my knowledge of how to put a deal together. And so you kind of rebuild and you stop crying over spilt milk and just get on with it.
It's having that attitude of extreme ownership will change your life forever in a positive fashion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No way. I would not have been able to dig myself out of that. I had to actually ask my brother for assistance. The banks came along, and it was coming up to Christmas around about 2013 or something like that. And the banks, they just came in and they pulled the rug from under me. Basically, they did this full cash sweep that they had. They had always the option of doing it, but they had never pulled it off. Yep. And this new relationship manager came along and decided that this is what he was going to do. So I went from having, plenty of rental income coming in from the different assets, even though they were below water, at least they were producing income. And at the time, interest rates were a bit like today. They're very, very low at the time. Yep. So there was a bit of a margin there that I could actually survive on, even though I was technically underwater at the time. But what happened was this guy came in and wanted to make a name for himself in the bank as Mr. Tough Guy. And he just pulled all of the income from those properties, every single penny of it. So I suddenly had zero income. After a couple, at one stage I had $1 million in passive income coming in every year, and suddenly you're looking at zero. And I couldn't afford rent, I couldn't afford, school fees, all of this stuff. It was really challenging. So I asked my brother, and he's such a solid guy. He kind of said, yeah, no problem. He had a place that he was renting in Dublin. He let me move into it, and it's a humbling place to be when you go from the hero to the zero in that kind of time frame. And that was the point when extreme ownership really sort of hit me, and I kind of went, you know what, I'm going to get myself out of this thing. And that's when it kind of really turned around. But you have to kind of hit a low point like that to kind of face up to it, I think.
A lot of people hit that low point and quit.
Yeah.
They go, forget this. In their mind, learn a different lesson. You took ownership, yes, but you could have taken ownership and gone and done something else, gone to any other industry, retreated back to just doing architectural work. What was inside of you that had you continue forward to persevere?
I think I think anyone who gets into this business needs to, do a kind of check on their own mindset at the beginning. And resilience is something that is really, really essential, because I know now, and since I started, coaching people on a lot of this kind of stuff, that this is a cyclical business. At the time, I was a little bit, green and naive, and I didn't realize that you're going to go through these ups and downs. And I'm sure we're going to be looking at some sort of an ups and down. There will be something that comes out of thin air, whether it's, Russia invading Ukraine or something that could just throw some sort of uncertainty into the market, and next minute everyone's taking cover. Sure. You just don't know. And because of that, I think I kind of thought to myself, okay, this is going to happen to other people. This is not the first time. I can remember in the 80s hearing my parents talking about, the crash during the 80s and stuff. And so I think I'm a natural sort of optimist. I kind of see the glass as half full most of the time when I can. Yeah. And so I think that kind of helped, certainly. But the exercise, the glass half full kind of attitude, and then just thinking to myself, okay, what are my options here? I can either retreat or I can kind of come out of this victorious. And I kind of thought it might take a couple of years, but I'm hoping that it'll be the victorious.
So let's talk about that, because from where you're at in the story right here to where you're at today, things are 180 degrees, right? I mean, totally different. You are victorious. So to walk me through, how did you get out of that and where are you today? How did you get to where you're at right now?
Well, where we're at today, I mean, I've got a kind of, there's two sides. There's my own personal stuff that I was doing, which really took a bad fall. And then there was the conservative sort of family business that I had stepped aside from to do my own thing. And thankfully that was there, because the conservative family business did not take those big gambles and those risks and stuff that I had taken. So part of my taking extreme ownership and also leaving behind, when you kind of get humbled like that, you start to get realistic. And I had always said to myself, I'm not going to work for the family business. I'm not going to get involved in the family business. I want to kind of do my own thing. But when you've got 5 kids that are, need to be fed and clothed and all that kind of stuff, you have to kind of get realistic. So my first thing was, look, I'm in a difficult situation. I need to find a way to kind of create an income. So I decided that, bury my pride and go back and just sort of see, can I get involved in the family business? At this stage, there was various people that had been brought in that were involved in the running of the business that had replaced me over the years. And so I had to kind of I had to be a little bit, I had to put the ego in check and just say, look, I'll just get involved. So that was the first step of it. That helped kind of stabilize things. And then at the same time, the various assets that were very much underwater for years, they started to come out of being so badly valued. Yeah. And the Irish market did start to rebound around about 2014. Yeah. And so it was a gradual, stabilizing the cash flow, getting sort of stabilized in that way was really important. And I would not have done that if I hadn't sort of buried the ego and just pretending that everything is great and I'm still this kind of high flyer, I think that's an important aspect, is just to put your feet on the ground and just sort of stay humble. And I think that's an important aspect. Getting involved in the family business opened up all sorts of opportunities as well, because they had some resources there that we could actually take advantage of the market the way it was. Sure. And so we've got a housing division, and we build houses, and we also have a commercial division. And I had spent, during the time that I had spent trying to shore up my Spanish project, I got involved in a couple of projects in the Middle East as a project manager. And I came back with a lot of commercial office knowledge and skills. Okay. And what we did is I got involved in the family business has a kind of an office park that we've developed from scratch. And I got involved in the running of that, and we started to buy it back. Over the years, we had built these assets, and we had sold off the assets to investors and Sure. groups and stuff and syndicates. And what we were able to do during the recession was actually start assembling the original assets and actually buying them back.
Bring them back, yep.
Yeah, at often below construction cost prices.
Below replacement pricing.
Yeah. Which was, so we've gone from building the place, selling off most of it, to actually buying back more than half of it. So it's a good position to be in now. And now we're in a situation where some of these assets are about 20 years old. The city is now going through a rezoning, and they're looking at increasing the floor area ratio about 3x.
Okay.
And so all of the buildings that are here could actually be 3 times larger.
3 times larger.
So it's been a good period to be getting it back involved.
You may yet close your career by finishing
Building
that
skyscraper
you dreamed so much about.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because Dublin is a very low-level city. The highest building has been for years 16 floors.
16.
And we've just built a 25-story building here in the city, and that's now the tallest.
Yeah.
But over the years, there's been vociferous kind of people against any kind of height. And suddenly that is starting to dissipate, and we're starting to hear about people talking about 30 and 40-story buildings. So we'll see. I would like to kind of finish out the career with the name on the tallest building or something like that.
That would be something.
Yeah.
Where are things now? Where are you headed for this year?
It's funny you say that. What I did in 2020, when the lockdown came about, I was running this business park, and there would normally be 8,000 or 9,000 people a day coming in. And we have a bus service that we do. We service we have a shuttle service that helps bring them around, and we would do 3,500 people a day. So it was a very active kind of a role. And suddenly we're sitting at home, nothing to do. All of the offices are sitting empty. So I thought, what can I do with this time? So I started a podcast, a little bit like yourself.
Yeah.
And I started kind of just putting out my story and talking about resilience and talking about the ups and downs and this. And it resonated with an audience, and they started kind of to follow. And I got a lot of requests from people saying, you should share this, or you should create like some sort of a program. So I've started building out a program where I teach people, I suppose the building blocks to putting a portfolio together and to scaling the business, and how to kind of grow it, and how to try to sidestep those negative moments, because it's a cyclical market. Building any kind of wealth is not a short-term thing. It's a 20-year, 30-year plan.
Correct.
And over that period of time, you're going to go through a couple of cycles. And so it's understanding that, and knowing that generally they're not signposted. So you're not going to be given plenty of notice that this big crash is coming, and just to be resilient and be ready for it, and just don't hate yourself.
You should go through a couple of cycles over that time period. We are at the point of the longest bull market in real estate history that we've ever seen. And so I echo what you're saying. You need to be giving thought to protecting yourself, protecting your assets, understanding what the downside is, especially it is cyclical, and sooner or later it will cycle downward. So
that's the thing. And the worst thing about it is that you never really see it coming. It's, 2008, like in 2007, I was buying assets, and I was making assumptions that next year this will grow by 25%, and suddenly you're there, and instead of going up by 20%, it's going down by 20%. And so, whoa, how did this happen?
Some lessons to be learned there. Yeah. Let's do this. I want to move on to our final segment, what I call for impact. So your favorite quote, Mark Twain said it, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do more than the ones you did. Why does that resonate with you?
It's funny. I found that quote in a book, or a postcard, actually, it was on, and I was only about 20 at the time. So I can remember seeing it and kind of going, wow, that's really profound. The idea that 20 years from now, you'd be looking back. And so I think that was one of the reasons that I went for it the way I did with all of these different things. I just thought to myself, I don't want to be somebody who kind of looks back and said, God, why didn't I try that? So I've tried an awful lot of things. I've learned to fly a plane, scuba dive. Whenever I'm talking to people, I've raced cars.
You've lived, Gavin.
Yeah. I've lived in the Middle East. I've lived in Africa. I've been around. And so whenever we're having a conversation with somebody, they kind of say, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. And I did that once. Yeah, it's really worth trying. And so I look back now and I say, I can definitely say that I have not sort of said no to an awful lot of things. And that's had good and bad impacts, but mostly I'm pretty positive about it.
What do you think holds most investors back from hitting their personal next level?
Yeah, when I think it's that we all have these, this doubt that we have, self-limiting beliefs. And then there's what I call FUD, or what a lot of people call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it's not just fear, uncertainty, and doubt with the market and where the market is going, but it's fear, uncertainty, and doubt with within your own mindset
to themselves. Yeah.
Whether or not you're doing the right thing. Are you cut out for this job? Is this something that, you should be doing, should be taking that risk? And so I think that really holds people. I think you have to get a hold of your own mindset pretty clear. If you're not clear on your personality and your strengths and weaknesses, then you're not going to be clear on the type of investment activity that you want to get involved in. You also have to know whether there's two sides of the spectrum. There's the gambler and there's the analyst. Yeah. And people generally fall somewhere between those two extremes. Yeah. And I know that in my early career, I was very much over in the gambler side. But I've met people work with me in my coaching on the analyst side. Yep. And they never move. They won't act on a deal. They spend so much time analyzing. So there's two extremes. You have to kind of understand where do you sit, and if you understand that you're more of a gambler, then you obviously have to tamper that. You have to kind of tamp that down a little bit, and you have to make sure that you have it under control. But if you know that you're more of an analyst, then you know that there's a risk of paralysis by analysis, and that you probably need a partner maybe. Who can come in and help you kind of nudge you along. Yeah, no,
that makes total sense. Outside of real estate, what are you most passionate about?
I would say my health and fitness is the number one. I signed up to do an Ironman here in Ireland. In August. I've done 2 half Ironman races before, and they can be pretty challenging. But the step up to full Ironman level, that's a whole different level. The training is the worst bit, but I enjoy it, and it gives me that kind of fresh mindset in the morning that I like. It's something that I absolutely chomping at the bit for it every morning.
No, it's great. What's your favorite way to make an impact in the community?
I think what I found was starting the podcast has been transformational. I had no idea that just sharing these stories could be so impactful. And I've had dozens, if not at this stage, maybe 100 or more comments, from messages, DMs from people just saying, wow, that was super helpful podcast this week, or whatever it is, but there's always some sort of message coming from somebody that insight or that, story really has helped them. And so that, I think, it's funny, you kind of think maybe you should do more work on charity or things like that. But I've seen people that really have found, just by me sharing my story, it's really helped them.
That's terrific. If people want to learn more about you, they want to learn about the podcast, they want to understand from a coaching standpoint how they can connect, where can they find you?
The best place to look for me in terms of the podcast, it's called Behind the Facade, and it's available in all the usual places in podcasts. So Behind the Facade. I have my own website, gavinjgallagher.com. And the J is for James. Don't leave that out, because there's about 50 or 60 Gavin Gallaghers out there. But Gavin J. Gallagher is what I go by. And so, if you do that, you'll find links to everything. All of my coaching and all that kind of stuff is all
perfect. We'll make sure we get all the links in the show notes here for you.
Thanks, Neil. Great.
I really appreciate you taking the time up. It's a tremendous lesson. And, most people never have the success that you have had early on in your career. And really, to a degree, you've had it twice, right? I mean, you've went to an incredible high very quick, found it really a bottom that allowed you to understand who you are as a person, and then to come back and second time around and being in the family, doing with some other folks, and build a tremendous success. And with a newfound, let's call it what it is, a newfound respect for the success you have today.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Neil. Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. All right.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story, because I know, as you said, it has been impactful for folks, and I know it'll impact the audience here. So thank you.
You're welcome. Most welcome. And great to be on your show.
Yeah. Say, for everybody here at Real Grit, I'm Neil Timmins, reminding you that real estate requires real grit. I'll see you next time. If you like our content and want more, you can access it at realgritpodcast.com. You hear it guest after guest. Instinctively, you already know it. But let me call it out. The most expensive action is inaction. The real estate market is full of opportunities. You just need to uncover them. You can build a business that lasts for years, makes monumental impact in the lives of those that you love. It's not just about business, but about the freedom you get because of it. Have you ever heard the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I believe that partnering is essential. In fact, I partner with hardworking investors all the time. The point is that you can get a lot further with the right partner. Let me say it again, the right partner. If you've ever thought about partnering with anyone, or if you have a partner now, I encourage you to download my free Partner and Profit Guide, which includes the top 5 must-answer questions to evaluate a profitable partnership. You can find it at www.legacyimpactpartners.com. I'll see you in the next episode.